Have you ever felt like your life has always been different? As if, since childhood, something bigger has been happening behind the scenes, preparing you for something you didn't even understand? Perhaps the difficulties he faced were not just coincidences. Perhaps the strange dreams, sharp intuition, and unwavering sense of justice were clues. The truth is that God doesn't choose people halfway. He separates them from the beginning. Many people go through life without realizing that they were chosen by God, ignoring the signs that He placed along their journey. They think the challenges were punishments, when, in fact, they were training. They think their difficult childhood was just bad luck, when in reality it was part of a bigger plan. And while they live distracted, they continue without understanding the purpose for which they were called. The Bible is full of examples like this. Joseph, Moses, Samuel, David. They all had signs from an early age that their lives would not be ordinary. And you? Have you ever received these signs without realizing it? Does God have something big for you and is just waiting for you to see it? If you've ever had that feeling that you don't belong in this world, that you were put here for a greater purpose, this video will open your eyes. Here are 5 signs that God has already chosen you since childhood, and I guarantee that when you finish watching, you will see your story with new eyes. From an early age, some people face challenges that seem bigger than them. While other children live carefree, there are those who carry a weight on their shoulders since childhood. Loneliness, rejection, and constant difficulties are not mere coincidences, but signs of a divine call. In the Bible, Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers and sold into slavery. Little did he know that each trial was part of God's purpose to make him a powerful leader in Egypt. Children who need to mature quickly from an early age learn lessons that others will only understand in adulthood. If you've always felt like your childhood was more of a battlefield than an amusement park, know that this could be a sign that you were chosen by God. Moses, for example, barely had time to be a child. His fate was sealed from the cradle. What seemed like abandonment was actually divine protection. How many times have you realized that the hardest moments prepared you for something greater? And it's not just about external difficulties, but also about internal restlessness. Spiritually sensitive children often question the meaning of life before they even understand the meaning of the word purpose. From an early age, the heart burns with questions that seem to have no answer. Why me? Why so much struggle? What does God want from me? These questions are echoes of the soul of someone with a special mission and vocation. Another detail that cannot be ignored: those who face many trials in childhood often develop a strong connection with the Bible and biblical references, even if they do not fully understand their meaning at first. The Word of God becomes a shelter before it is even a conscious choice. Children like this have a hunger for something greater, a desire to understand mysteries that others don't even understand. And this search is one of the biggest signs that there is something great in store for them. But anyone who thinks that this preparation ends in childhood is mistaken. Challenges are not random obstacles. They are divine training for future missions. David himself faced lions and bears before defeating Goliath. So, if your childhood was marked by difficulties, perhaps it's time to see these moments with different eyes. After all, when God has a purpose for someone, He shapes that person from an early age, and the signs of this continue to emerge throughout life. There are people who, since they were little, feel that there is something different about them. They dream about situations that end up happening, sense dangers before they become real, or simply know things without a logical explanation. This is no coincidence. The Bible is full of examples of people guided by intuition and prophetic dreams, and if this happens to you, it could be another sign that there is a divine call on your life. Jose, for example, received dreams that revealed his destiny and the future of his family, but few understood this at the time. The most intriguing thing is that these visions do not always come clearly. Sometimes a dream may seem like a simple daydream, but it carries a profound message. Elijah, for example, heard God's voice not in a strong wind or an earthquake, but in a whisper. Spiritual sensitivity often manifests itself like this: small details that most ignore, but for those who have a purpose, are divine signs. Have you ever had that inexplicable feeling that you needed to do or avoid something, and then realized it was the best decision? In addition to dreams, this intuition also manifests itself in everyday life. Some people feel restlessness before making certain decisions, a weight in their chest when something is wrong, or an inexplicable peace when following a specific path. This is because God speaks in many ways, and one of them is through this internal connection. Anyone who has a special mission needs to learn to decipher these signs. A good exercise to strengthen this perception is to keep a spiritual diary, writing down dreams, presentiments, and events that confirm these sensations. And if anyone doubts this, just look at the Bible. Daniel interpreted dreams and visions that no one else understood. Samuel, still a child, heard God call his name. What seemed strange to others was, in fact, training for something greater. If you notice that these things happen frequently in your life, maybe it's time to pay more attention. God doesn't reveal things for no reason. If He's showing you something, there's a purpose behind it. And the more this sensitivity grows, the more evident another striking characteristic of the chosen ones becomes: the role of being a refuge for others. After all, those who receive such a clear spiritual vision often end up attracting people who need direction. From an early age, some people seem to have a magnet for those who are suffering. Friends, family, and even strangers feel free to vent, as if they knew, instinctively, that they would find support there. This is not just a personal characteristic, but a sign from God. Those who have been chosen by God often become a refuge before they even understand their own mission. They carry a healing energy, a presence that conveys peace, and this does not go unnoticed. And the curious thing is that, often, these people are also facing their own struggles. Even so, they find the strength to advise, listen, and offer support. Anyone who has this gift knows that it is not a burden, but a calling. David, before he was king, already attracted followers who sought protection and guidance. Joseph, in Egypt, even though he was a prisoner, became a counselor for the other inmates. If you feel like you have always been a safe haven for others, this could be another sign of God's purpose for your life. This also explains why some spiritually sensitive people feel drained. Absorbing other people's pain is a real burden, and without balance, it can be exhausting. Therefore, it is essential to seek strength from God. The Bible and biblical references are full of examples of spiritual leaders who needed to find rest in prayer. Jesus, despite being the greatest refuge of all, constantly withdrew to talk to the Father. This is a fundamental lesson for those who carry out this mission. A practical way to deal with this responsibility is to establish moments of spiritual renewal. Reading Psalms to find peace, setting aside times for prayer, and even practicing silence can help recharge this energy. Furthermore, learning to say no when necessary is also a form of wisdom. God empowers us to be a shelter, but He also teaches us to care for ourselves. After all, a boat cannot save others if it is sinking. And there is an important detail. Whoever has this mission of welcoming usually also carries a deep sense of justice. After all, upon hearing so many stories of pain and suffering, a strong aversion to injustice naturally arises. Some people just can't ignore what's wrong. From an early age, they feel deeply uncomfortable when they see lies, betrayal, or any form of oppression. This is not a coincidence. The strong aversion to injustice is a striking trait of those who have a divine calling. Moses could not bear to see an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew and intervened, even without knowing that, in the future, he would be the liberator of Israel. This sense of justice, which seems to burn in the chest, is a sign that God has placed something greater within these people. And this characteristic manifests itself in different ways. It could be that indignation when seeing someone being treated unfairly, the difficulty in accepting falsehoods, or even the desire to defend those who have no voice. People like this cannot just let go of something that violates their principles. This happens because the truth is deeply intertwined with your spiritual sensitivity. They don't just see injustice, they feel it as if it was something personal. The problem is that this characteristic can generate conflicts. Those who do not tolerate injustice often come into conflict with those who prefer to remain silent or accommodate themselves. Jeremiah, for example, suffered persecution because he spoke truths that no one wanted to hear. Jesus bothered the Pharisees precisely by exposing their hypocrisies. If you've ever felt like you're rowing against the tide by not accepting what's wrong, know that this is part of the price of carrying a greater purpose. But this aversion to injustice can also be channeled constructively. If you feel this calling, use it to transform realities. Defend those in need, speak the truth wisely, and, above all, keep your heart aligned with God's principles. There are many ways to fight injustice, from small gestures, such as correcting a lie, to larger actions, such as supporting fair causes and helping those who cannot defend themselves. The important thing is to understand that this flame inside you is not there by chance. And the most interesting thing, people with this sense of justice are often given responsibilities from an early age. After all, those who were born to lead already feel the weight of choices from an early age. There are people who, since childhood, carry a greater weight than others. While some children played without worries, others already had to take care of siblings, help with the household bills, or make important decisions ahead of time. This is no coincidence. In the Bible, we see that many of the great leaders faced early responsibilities. David was just a young shepherd when he protected his sheep from lions and bears. Jose was sold into slavery as a teenager, but quickly assumed leadership positions. Anyone carrying a special mission needs to be prepared from an early age. This forced maturity may have seemed unfair in the past, but over time, it became evident that God was shaping something greater. Those who have been chosen by God do not have an ordinary life, because their training is not ordinary either. The trials and challenges faced in youth were not just random difficulties, but rather part of a divine process. It's like a blacksmith heating metal to make it stronger. Each responsibility assumed in childhood was a step towards purpose. And it's not just in the family. Many of these people were also seen as natural leaders at school, work, or even among friends. They were the ones everyone turned to for advice or help. This is a pattern that repeats itself throughout life, because those with a divine calling are trained to care for others. Moses had to lead an entire people through the desert. David went from being a shepherd to king of Israel. Those who receive more responsibilities early are often being prepared to lead crowds. However, with this weight also comes the need for balance. When a person spends their entire life carrying burdens, they may forget to look at themselves. Jesus, who came to serve, also knew when to withdraw to pray and recharge. Therefore, learning to rest in God is fundamental for those who have this mission. After all, carrying great responsibilities does not mean carrying everything alone. And if all this makes sense to you, maybe it's time to understand that your life is not ordinary. There are signs, clues, and confirmations everywhere. And now, the question is, have you noticed how many of these signs God has placed in your path? Now that you know these signs, the question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Knowing you've been chosen by God isn't just an interesting detail about your life, it's a call to action. It's not enough to recognize the signs, it is necessary to accept them, embrace them, and walk in God's purpose. After all, What's the point of knowing that there's a mission waiting for you if you continue living as if you were just another person? Look at your story with new eyes. Every trial and challenge, every early responsibility, every prophetic dream, nothing was by chance. God does not waste pain. What you went through was training, and if He prepared you, it's because there is something great ahead. The question is, are you willing to take on this mission? And more, which of these signs have you noticed in your own life? Have you ever felt like you were a haven for others? Have you ever had that spiritual sensitivity that made you see what no one else saw? Share your experience in the comments. Your story could be the confirmation someone needs. And if this content made sense to you, don't let this journey stop here. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue learning about your calling and your mission. God is speaking to you, and now the decision is in your hands.